You've probably asked yourself this question more times than you can count. Was it my fault? Was I too much, too sensitive, or not enough? Did I push them away, or did I hold on too tightly? Should I have seen it coming? Should I have walked away first? It's like your brain won't stop scanning for the moment things broke. Like, if you could just find an answer to these questions, you could finally put your mind to rest. And the worst part? You're doing this alone, in the midst of your pain, and it's keeping you from healing or moving forward in any way. If you're stuck in that loop, asking yourself if it's all your fault, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You're not crazy for wanting to understand what happened. That doesn't make you overdramatic. Because when something ends, especially something that mattered, your brain looks for control. And blame is control's closest friend. Like, if you were the problem, you can fix it. If you caused it, then you can prevent it from ever happening again. And so the spiral continues. You replay everything, every conversation, every silence, every time you spoke up or didn't speak up. You try to find the thread that snapped. And if you're someone who tends to take on emotional responsibility for other people, then you've probably decided the thread was you. But here's the truth, which most people won't say out loud. You can be imperfect and still not be the reason it ended. You can have regrets without being the one to blame. You can hold space for growth and still be chosen. Relationships don't end because one person was flawed. They end because something in the connection couldn't hold both people fully. And yes, maybe you made mistakes. Maybe there were things you wish you'd done differently. But mistakes aren't the same thing as being at fault. They don't disqualify you from love. They don't make you unworthy, and they definitely don't mean you deserved what happened. Let's talk about why this question, was it my fault, feels so heavy. Why does it keep you up at night, and why does it swirl around in your head all day? Because there's something deeper happening here. When a relationship ends and you don't fully understand why, your brain starts scanning for patterns. Not because you're obsessed, but because you're trying to stay safe. You've been hurt and you're trying to make sure this doesn't happen again. And one of the fastest ways to make sense of chaos is to blame yourself. Self-blame gives you something to hold on to. If it was your fault, then at least there's a reason. At least you can fix it. At least next time you'll know what to do differently. And if you're wired for empathy, if you tend to carry other people's emotions or grew up in an environment where you had to over-explain or overperform to stay connected, then blaming yourself won't feel like punishment. It'll feel familiar, almost like a kind of safety. Listen up to really hear this. Some of us were trained to believe that if something breaks, we must have caused it, even when we didn't. Especially when we didn't. So, if you see a pattern in always pointing the finger back at yourself, it isn't because you're to blame, but because historically, it's felt safer for you to accept responsibility than to not. Accepting blame equaled protection. So no, you're not crazy for asking if it was your fault. You're not weak and you're not being dramatic. You're trying to make sense of something that didn't come with clarity, and you're trying to take ownership of something you couldn't control, because ownership feels better than helplessness. And that makes sense. But here's what else is true. Just because you feel responsible doesn't mean you are. Just because your mind keeps replaying the moments you wish you'd handled differently doesn't mean those moments are why it ended. You're looking at the entire relationship under a microscope, but the fault line wasn't something you said. It was something they weren't able to hold. They couldn't communicate it and they didn't want to confront it. That's not on you. If they didn't give you closure and let you take the fall for something you didn't cause, of course you'd believe it was your fault, but wondering doesn't make it true. Let's slow this down for a second. Because maybe there were things you wish you'd done differently. Maybe you were anxious or you communicated poorly sometimes. Maybe you snapped or avoided or shut down and had patterns that came up under stress. You're allowed to own that, but owning your imperfections isn't the same thing as carrying blame for a broken relationship. A relationship is a dynamic, a system built between two people, not a scorecard of one person's flaws. So when it falls apart, it's because the dynamic or system you had together couldn't support both of you. That's not a blame statement. That's a truth statement. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about what the relationship could or couldn't hold. Maybe they pulled away anytime you got close, or you stayed quiet to avoid rocking the boat. Maybe the emotional labor felt one-sided, or there were trust issues that never got named. Those are all shared system problems. It takes both people fully committed to create a strong relationship system. When it's not strong enough, it may be able to support one person. And if they left without taking ownership of their part, then you're left to carry all the weight. So here's a better question than was it my fault? Try this instead. What was mine to carry and what wasn't? That question gives you power without taking on pain that doesn't belong to you. Because yeah, maybe there were things you could have done better. But guess what? That's true for everyone. You're not the exception. You're not disqualified from love because you're an imperfect person. You're human, just like everyone else, and that doesn't make you the villain. So what do you do with all these guilty feelings? Let's talk about it. Guilt shows up for two reasons: because you did something wrong, or because you cared deeply about not doing something wrong. And a lot of the time, especially in heartbreak, it's the second one. You care, overanalyze, and replay because you're wired for responsibility, and you're trying to fix something after it's already fallen apart. Those feelings of failure don't mean you failed. It means you're emotionally alive and love matters to you. That's not something to be ashamed of. But here's the part we don't talk about enough. Guilt is not a growth strategy. Self-punishment doesn't heal hearts or relationships. Beating yourself up won't bring clarity. It just wears you down. It delays your healing and tricks you into thinking that suffering will lead to peace of mind. But that's not how it works. Peace comes when you decide to stop arguing with what you can't change and start showing compassion to the version of you who was doing your best at the time. Maybe there are moments or words that you regret. Maybe you wish you'd been more secure or less reactive or more patient. Okay, so what do you do with that? You can learn from it and use it to repair if you get the chance. But if you don't, you forgive yourself anyway. Not because you were perfect, but because perfection was never the goal. Let's be real, healing doesn't always look clean and confident. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence, wondering why you still care. Sometimes it looks like crying over someone who didn't fight for you. Sometimes it looks like having no clear answers and deciding to keep living anyway. But if you're still hurting more than you're healing, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means it mattered and that your nervous system is still recalibrating. That process doesn't come with a schedule, it comes in waves. You might still wish they would explain or fantasize about them coming back and telling you it wasn't your fault and that they see things so differently now. But even if you don't get that, I want you to remember this. Peace doesn't come from their closure, it comes from yours, the kind you build in quiet moments. The kind that sounds like, I may never know exactly what happened, but I know I tried and showed up with love. I gave what I had and I can live with that. And if you're a person of faith, let this be your anchor. God is not sitting in judgment, replaying your mistakes on a loop. He's not disappointed in how long it's taking you to get over it. He's not waiting for you to clean yourself up emotionally before he meets you where you're at. He's already there. You don't have to be over it to be healing, and you don't have to understand it to be moving forward. You don't have to carry it all to prove you're strong. Sometimes strength is putting it down and saying, this isn't all mine to carry, and letting that be enough. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying, consider subscribing. I'll be posting more videos like this one. You don't have to go through this alone, and you don't have to rush to feel better. You may not have all the answers, but you are still seen, loved, and held by a God who doesn't abandon the brokenhearted.